Hello, everybody, and welcome to Telescope Talk Hangout. This is the amateur astronomer version where we get together every week to talk about the hobby of amateur astronomy live on YouTube and Twitter and that's the same thing. Periscope, Twitter is the same thing. Twitch, I'm on Twitch, and we're also streaming from the OPT Telescopes page on Facebook. So we are out there, and if you're not here, then that's your problem because we're everywhere. Okay. Today we are going to talk. I have my colleague over at OPT Telescopes, Ian Lauer, with me. Hi, Ian. We're both up. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Tony. I'm always excited to be here.
Yeah. We had a great hangout last time talking about the top 5 telescopes, and we're continuing the series today. We're going to talk the broadly ranged topic of astronomy and outreach is going to be our topic today. We're going to tell you a little bit about some of the ways you can get involved in astronomy outreach, the way in amateur astronomy. We're going to talk to you about a little bit about how we do it. And we want to know if you do it as well. Let us know how on the various chats everywhere. I want to remind everybody that these hangouts are sponsored by OPT Telescopes, and so they are bringing this to you so that we can enhance your enjoyment of the night sky. And we are, if you go to the link if you go to the description box of this hangout, you will see that we also have a Discord server, which I invite you to join. So I'm looking at all the chats. Larry Keese is there, Hans Milling, Super Luminal, and of course my good friend Peter Quinn. Lots of you guys are here. Tell us how you guys do outreach besides hanging out in YouTube chats. Okay. I want to know. All right, Ian. So you do this for a living, right? This is your job. You do astronomy outreach.
Yes, that's right. I do. I mean, first and foremost, I love astronomy. I love space. I love anything that has to do with those fields and just science in general. I went to school for physics and astronomy, so that really is my passion. But one of the things that really got me interested in sharing astronomy and sharing space telescopes and looking through the telescope, that experience was when I was in school. One of our projects we had to do was pair up with a local school or local some kind of community event and do an outreach event. So we did one with 6th graders. We went up to the observatory up in Fickle Hill at Humboldt State, and we had these 6th graders. We pointed the 16-inch telescope at Orion, at the Orion Nebula, and one kid in particular always stands out.
Yep, that's always
He got
true.
up to the eyepiece. He went up to the eyepiece, took a look, and of course, as they look at it, you start to explain, okay, so this is the Orion Nebula. This is where stars are born. You know, this thing is X amount of light years away and X amount of light years across. And I just remember him just getting so excited, looking through the eyepiece. I just tell him, hey, it's this many light years away. And he just screams, light years, whoa!
He said light years, man.
Yeah. And just seeing that reaction, I mean, just it always stayed with me, and I love seeing people's reactions when they look through the eyepiece, especially for the first time.
I know there's lots of really great things to show people for the first time that I always like doing. My favorite is Saturn, of course, where when they see the rings through an eyepiece for the first time, it's like they saw a movie star, right? They just, oh, there's the rings. That's what it's not a photo. It just finally gels on them that this isn't a Hubble Space Telescope image. This is actually Saturn, photons from which are coming into their eye, and they're looking at it right now. And that I think it's funny to watch that kind of, realization hit these people when they realize that this is not a picture, this is a real thing. So when you how often do you go to schools?
So usually it's when they reach out, usually once a month or once every other month. I'll usually get in contact with them, and it's usually through other outreach programs. So once a month, OPT gets together with a local brewery called Wavelength Brewing Company, a science-themed brewery. It's basically a sports bar for nerds. It's an awesome place. Awesome place. And we have a 20-inch Skywatcher Dobsonian that we use to show people the moon. It's in downtown Vista, so light pollution everywhere, cars everywhere, people everywhere, but doesn't matter because we've got a 20-inch Dob pointed at the moon. And so people will come up, take a look through it, and of course, they're always blown away. The number one reaction that I always get when people look at the moon is, "Oh my God." That is like the number one reaction I get from people. So doing these events, people who come up, never looked through one before, they come up and love talking about it, love the experience, and then say, "You know what, I'm actually a teacher at X school, or I work with Girl Scouts, I work with Boy Scouts, we'd love to have you, do something like this for our club." So that's usually how I get involved with these schools and all these different communities doing outreach.
Okay. Good. And Z Black Rider, your question, I want to get to it, but I need to first, before we answer your question, I need to follow up. I need to clarify. He's asking, is making my own lens too difficult to bother? And so I'm going to ask you, are you talking about a camera lens or a telescope lens? Put it in the chat and I'll come back to your question. But I want to follow up with what you just said, Ian. I just read an article. There was a guy in outreach can take any form. As long as you're, talking about the stars to anybody who will listen. You can even be one of those guys with a megaphone just talking about the life cycle of stars if that's what you want to do. But there was a guy in Baltimore who recently retired, an old guy, for 30 years, would go and take his C8 out to Fells Point, which is near the Inner Harbor, and he would set up outside. For 30 years, he did this. And it was out that area of Fells Point has lots of nightclubs, lots of restaurants that people go to. It's a real posh area of Baltimore. And he would just set up his scope and he put up a little, I think a hat or a jar or a cup or something for people to put change in and just show people the stars. He was an older, I don't know, 30 years he did that. He wasn't old when he started. But anyway, it was a great story because here's a guy who had very simple tools. All he had was some eyepieces and a C8 and a motor drive. He'd plug it in. And he'd pick an object like the moon. Tonight's the moon, or maybe the Orion Nebula, whatever you could see from downtown Baltimore, which, is hard. And he would just put it in there and he'd sit down, he'd watch people, he'd talk to people, would come in and look, and they'd ask him questions about it. And one of the things in that article that struck me was that they would often say, and these are adults, that's the first time they've ever looked through a telescope. So it's important to get out there with your scope. And I've done it many times myself. Well, not many. I've done it sometimes. I'm kind of an introvert. I don't like drawing a lot of attention to myself, these hangouts notwithstanding. But I kind of like not being out. Whenever I'm making a video in public, I don't want anybody to watch me do it. So I'm very self-conscious that way. But I have gone out with a telescope a few times on a sidewalk in Boulder, actually, and set it up and just showed people stuff. And they're always friendly. It's always a good interaction. So it's a good way to do outreach. That's true. Okay, so let me see if I can find it. He didn't follow up, did he? Oh, yeah. No. See, Blackrock said a Dobsonian. I think he means a mirror.
Oh, like grinding your own mirror.
Yeah, I think people do that. People get lens and mirror confused. Don't you find that? I mean, sometimes people say, what kind of lens does it have? Well, it's a reflector, so it doesn't have one.
I think objective, right? That's that's
what they mean to say. And I think he's asking, is it too much trouble to make your own? What do you think about that?
I don't really have experience making my own telescope. I know people do it. They actually have a meeting in, I believe it's in Big Bear, RTMC, for the Telescope Makers Conference. So that, there definitely is a community for amateur telescope makers. But, if you want to put the work in, sit there and start grinding your own mirror and having the satisfaction of, I made this myself, of course, go right ahead. It's probably really, really, really exciting knowing that I made this Dobsonian all by myself. And then when you bring it for first light and you get those photons hitting your eyes, a nice, clear, sharp image, that must be a very, very satisfying experience.
Yes, agreed. It is. And I've done it. And I made an 8-inch, and hopefully I just opened my drawer, and in a minute I'm going to see if I can find it. It's right down there. But I made an 8-inch Newtonian, and it is a beginner's activity in the sense that you don't need a lot of special equipment, and it's not even really hard. All you're doing is you're taking two pieces of glass that are flat. They used to be Pyrex glass. I don't know what they have now. But they take two Pyrex discs and you just start rubbing them together. And as you rub them together, you have abrasive in the middle. And that abrasive is different grades, like sandpaper. There's really rough. You start with really rough abrasive, and then as you get closer and closer to where you want to be, you use finer and finer grades. Now, if you notice in my hands, the center part of my palms are always touching. They're always grinding. So they're grinding more, the center of the mirror, than the outer edges. So what you end up, so you grind for a while, and then you rotate one, and then you just start grinding again. And then you rotate, and then you just keep grinding. And what you keep doing is eventually you're carving out. If you do nothing and you just hold the top mirror blank back and forth, and then rotate a little bit, go back and forth, rotate a little bit, go back and forth, leaving the bottom one alone, what you end up with is a sphere. And you've got a spherical curvature. The trick to making your own mirror is now, if you're making a Dobsonian, which is, as John Suffel likes to point out, a Newtonian on a Dobsonian mount, then you need to turn it into a parabola. And that's hard. That's harder. You can do it. But I did it once, and you think I'm going to make an F6 mirror. That's what you say to yourself. And you end up with an F7. You're like 7 point whatever. Okay, I'll just stop there.
You just deal with the outcome. Actually, Kevin he has his own group, outreach group called Focus Astronomy. He actually is making I believe it's a 28-inch Dobsonian, and he's currently in the process of grinding the mirror. So shout out to Kevin. Looking forward to that, and hopefully once first light comes, you're going to get a lot of people's eyes opening wide, seeing the moon and the planets for the first time.
Very true. Very true. Now, what about you guys sell telescopes? I know, but do you guys also sell components? Like, could somebody just buy a primary from you guys if they wanted to?
So we don't sell those. But there are places you can get them from, and there's tons of resources online, tons of places where you can find out information on how to make your own telescopes. But if you want to do outreach, and you don't have a telescope, you can buy even like a 70 millimeter refractor, even a small telescope, and that's enough to blow people's minds. Because it's like you said, most people in the world have never looked through a telescope. I mean, I remember having a 14-inch Dob pointed at the moon, and this 70-year-old woman came up and wanted to look through it, and she put her eye up to the eyepiece and was just very, very calm, came down from the ladder and looked at me and said, "That was the first time in my entire life I've ever seen the moon like that." And she was so thankful and blown away. She was almost at the point of tears. She almost cried from the beauty of that. And she was like, "In my life, I've never seen anything like that. Thank you so much." And it's moments like that that truly make astronomy outreach worth it.
That is a great story. I mean, it's so hard to get time, I guess, in your life to just look up. I mean, the other night I was I couldn't find anything I really wanted to watch on TV. It was really warm outside. I just went outside and sat up and just watched the night sky for a while. But a lot of people don't get that. They don't remember to do that, and they don't think to do that. So it's really amazing when you do get a chance to show them. Now, I just want to say back on this comment of building versus buying. A lot of people just put together the components, and you can sometimes save money. But really, telescopes have come down in price so much that it's probably, unless you just want to learn for yourself how optics work, then there's really no reason to make your own. Not in this day and age. They're so cheap to buy that you could buy something so much better than what you could make. That I would just say do that, unless you just want to do it. That's different. So Superluminal's commenting, "I did some mini outreach the other night. I just moved to a new apartment, and the super and I spent some time on the roof with binoculars while I pointed out some constellations." See there, folks? That's what you do. Way to go.
That's outreach.
Yeah, that's outreach. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what other things you guys are involved in. You guys have a lot of things that people can do.
Oh yeah.
So why don't you tell us
we've got a lot of projects going on. I think especially in this day and age, maybe the term outreach is starting to shift a bit. I kind of consider sharing astrophotography as a way of outreach, because not everyone can show up to, let's take Wavelength Brewery, for example. Not everyone can make it down there on that specific night. to look through the telescope and enjoy the views. Some people, they live far away, they live on the other side of the planet, or, maybe they're clouded out. I think social media is a great way to do outreach. One of the things that we've been doing.
It's my job. It's the way I make a career.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, everything you're doing, it's your career is astronomy outreach. All the videos you're doing, whether it's professional or amateur, astronomy, space, all that stuff is a perfect way to get people interested. And I know Dustin is really big on Instagram. And I completely agree that using social media like Facebook, Instagram, and sharing photos is a perfect way to get people interested, because they'll see, oh, this is a cool looking picture. And then they realize, oh, someone took this picture. That might, turn a light bulb on in someone's head, say, oh, wow, I can do that. It's not, you don't need Hubble anymore. You don't need a professional observatory. Now I can actually go home, get this equipment, and start taking photos like this on my own. I feel like that's another form of outreach, is social media, getting people involved that way and making people aware, spreading awareness.
Yeah, and Hans Milling is commenting, always bring a laser pointer. It is so much better than pointing with a finger. People can clearly see what you point at no matter where they stand around you. I'm kind of torn about that. What do you think of that advice? These are kind of dangerous. And they're getting more powerful all the time. You can buy a I think it's a 2-watt laser.
Oh, man.
And that's handheld and pointed up at the sky, and that thing makes a beam. I mean, you can hurt somebody with that. What do you think of that?
Yeah. They definitely impress. I mean, when you get that laser out and you point it, especially people who've never seen astronomy lasers where you can see where someone's pointing, people's minds are blown. So that's a fun aspect of it. If you're at a star party, a lot of people don't like them because they're imaging and it'll interfere with their imaging. I'm with you. I'm kind of torn. Sometimes I think it's definitely worth it to have it, especially if it's more a visual star party or outreach event. If it's an imaging event, maybe not so much, just because it could interfere. And like you said, you got to be careful with them, right? You got to follow the rules. Don't point them at helicopters and planes and things like that.
I'll never forget it when I saw that one it was so powerful. It was, it was like the guy had bought it from some catalog, and I was in Miami at the time, and I shined it, and it was like, oh man, I don't even want to deal with this. It was really scary. Wow. You could blind somebody from miles away for that thing. So these are over the counter. I mean, you just buy them, and so I don't know about laser pointers, guys, but I do think that they're useful, certainly in a planetarium. I'd use them there. So Ian, Tony, this is from Larry Keese. Is it possible to get help deforking? Is that a word? My 12-inch LX200 RC with GPS, or is there a YouTube class? Well, Larry, that's a very specific issue, and I don't know if we're going to have a whole class on deforking your scope. That just sounds wrong when you say it. I don't know. So apparently he wants to take, he's got a 12-inch Schmidt cast that he bought that does not have Schmidt GPS, and he wants it. So what's your advice for that kind of a situation?
We have one of the employees here, Blake. Actually, he deforked his mead. So if you want to shoot us an email,
this is a thing.
It's a thing. Yeah, it's a thing. Shoot us an email and let us know. We'll get Blake in touch with you, and he could give you advice on how he did it to his. I think he had a 14-inch, but deforking. Yes, it is a real term, Tony.
All right, Larry, you get prepared to be deforked by Blake. I don't know what to even say about it. I'll keep visioning this fork in the head, but okay. Okay, so let's switch gears just a little bit. I want to talk about outreach from a general level. One of the things that I do not want to talk about today is this cigar-shaped asteroid named Onu Manu Onomatopoeia, whatever it's called, asteroid that is not a spaceship. Okay. I think there's a part of outreach because of the way we are in our culture now, and the social media is so prevalent that astronomers now are getting in on the act by trying to always remain in the news cycle, and they want, because they've come to realize that the more they're in the news cycle, the more famous they get, the more funding they may or may not get for whatever. I personally think it's getting a bit ridiculous. I'll get your opinion in a minute, Ian. People are using the site I call it AstroPH. It's archive.org or something like that. But where scientists post their papers before they've been accepted by a peer-reviewed journal, because they don't want to get scooped and they want people to get the word out that, hey, this is my paper. And 9 times out of 10, they are not. That's not true. A lot of times they are not. They don't end up in peer-reviewed journals. And so what news media has started to do is look at AstroPH. They've learned about it. Science writers, they've learned about it. Science correspondents, and they look every day at the list that comes out of new papers, and they pick the ones that have the most catchy titles, right? This could be an alien, or 20% of the galaxy could be colonized within 6 million years, and they'll pick some. And then, of course, when you're a science writer, you see that and you go, oh, this is written by a astronomer and it's getting peer reviewed. I'm going to go ahead and write a paper on it. And it turns out maybe not so much. This they're not going to get peer reviewed, or it does, and it gets rejected. So this is a trend I'm seeing on my news feed now, and I don't just watch Facebook. I'm watching, all of my time honored science news feed of things like Popular Science and New York Times, trusted sources. I don't know. I'm just getting a little discouraged about it. I think that people need to be careful with what they read and what they watch. And this cigar-shaped thing was a sensationalized thing. And the last time we talked about this topic was with Tabby Star. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Tabby Star was this Dyson sphere, maybe, kind of thing. So I don't know. Do you got any comments on that, or do you just want to move on? Because to me, it's a little bit of a pet peeve. I'm getting a little tired of it.
I think you're right. I mean, these sensationalized headlines, it's really just to bring attention. And I think it's going to catch the eye of a lot of people. And that's kind of the point they want, right? Is to bring you in and get you reading these clickbaity headlines. Maybe not even read the article, just see the headline. And then you tell your friends, hey, I read this article, even though you only read the headline. And I think that is a trend maybe among our culture, but I think the best thing people can actually do is read the original paper. That's the best way to get the information. Now,
well, yeah, but you've got to be experienced enough with the jargon. It's hard enough for one astronomer, a planetary astronomer, to read a paper from its own class than it is to read and to then go to change to a cosmology paper. So even that's hard for a trained astronomer. So if you're going to do that as a science writer, you really need to know some stuff, right?
Yeah, it's I don't know. Is that a form of outreach? I guess it is, right? Because you're bringing attention to topics in astronomy, so you're kind of publicizing astronomy. And again, I'm all for people writing articles, any fun news stories that come up, but I think people just need to maybe be a little more careful with accepting everything as fact right away.
Yeah,
I think that's what we need to do, and maybe it's our responsibility and not the writer's responsibility. Who knows?
Or at least have caveats. If you're going to do it, then say the problems with what you're reading, or the problems with your opinions. If they are opinions, make sure you state that they're opinions. Okay, I'll stop there. But I thank you for indulging me, Ian. I just wanted to talk about that. Chris Rand, you're on Facebook. Welcome. It's good to see you. Please ask questions if you want to. Alexander Beltzer Sweeney has a comment on Facebook as well. He says, well, this is cool. I think there is a great opportunity for outreach at San Diego Mesa College. I am the president of the Astronomy Club, member of SDAA, and I would love to collaborate.
Oh, of course. Let us know. Give us a call. Send us an email, send us a message on Facebook, and we'll get something set up, because we love doing outreach events. We actually have one coming up here at the end of the month in collaboration with Agua Hedionda, the Lagoon Foundation in Carlsbad. They have an astronomy night. Last year we did Joshua Tree Night Sky Festival. They're doing it again this year. This weekend, actually, it's coming up. These are all great events for people to go to. And I funny story about the not funny, but interesting story about the Night Sky Festival out in Joshua Tree. We did it last year, and myself and a colleague of mine went to it, and everyone there who was had a telescope set up, they were all visual, and I was the only person with a camera. And as the night went on, more and more people started showing up, and it was so crowded. I was shoulder to shoulder with people, and there were people from all over the world. Germany, Japan. There were people from South Africa, Australia.
They were just in the area. They weren't coming for this, right?
They were in the area, but the amount of people that were there, the location we were at was the overflow location, because they have a main area where people would go to, and then if that got full, they'd send people our way. And we were overloaded there were so many people. I was getting dizzy just seeing this. And again, it's completely dark, moonless night. You can see the Milky Way. So it was freaking awesome. And especially a lot of these people have never experienced that before. So it was really cool seeing them just staring up with their jaw on the floor. Just like, oh my gosh, look at how many stars there are. I thought there were like 10 stars in the sky, not 10,000,
Well, how this was, you said it was Joshua Tree?
Yes, this was through the national park.
Wow. So I wonder if they did some advertising for that, or if it was just people at the park already and they were just taking advantage of it or whatever. So how far away are you guys from San Diego? I don't know.
We're in San Diego, so we're in North County.
So, I don't know. Carlsbad, I don't have a good sense of where it is. So you're there.
We're there.
So Alexander, reach out, make use of this, do some outreach, man.
You're on Facebook. Send us a Facebook message.
Yeah, definitely. Galaxia, welcome. It's good to see you here. And Andrew Planet. I was just telling Ian about you guys, where you're from, and then you guys are people who are in a lot of our hangouts. Upcycle electronics. But Tony, most people are dumb. Is bad publicity? I better not go here. Is bad publicity or misinformation going to drive a bigger audience? Devil's advocate here, and not really what I believe. Okay, well, thank you, Upside Electronics. I can't comment. I'm not going to say most people are dumb. What do you want me to say there? But I do think that it is the responsibility of the person doing the outreach, whether it's me or Ian or an astronomer working at a university somewhere, that when they are saying things, that they say the right thing, and if they aren't sure, they say that. And if there's a lot of like a good example is exoplanets, right? We measure exoplanets, Kepler does, and a lot of ground-based observatories, by looking at tiny dips in brightness of a star. What can you learn about that from an exoplanet? Well, you can learn about its size, and you can learn about something about the brightness of the star, and you can learn something about its orbit around that star. And that's about it. You're not going to know if it's got an atmosphere or not, because all we're measuring is a dip in brightness. So when I start hearing that it's in a habitable zone and if it's got an atmosphere, they start talking about we could live there. This is an Earth-like planet. No, it is an Earth-sized planet, and it may or may not be like Earth. It depends on whether it even has an atmosphere. We don't know that yet. That's an example of what I'm talking about. I think even NASA does this, and I think they do it because they know they want to get you jazzed up about this, right? And they want to, we can go there. This is an Earth-like planet. And I think we need to be a little bit careful about it. That's all. Okay, so what else should we talk about? What other thing do you want to bring up that you guys are working on?
I know it's been mentioned in the podcasts that we've been
plug
doing.
The podcast.
Yeah, so hey, all of you out there, I highly recommend you check out our new podcast called Space Junk. And anyone who listens and follows us, welcome to the family. You are now a space junkie.
Oh, is that why? I wondered why Dustin goes, we're going to call it Space Junk because it's really cool. And I knew it. I knew there was a joke coming in there somewhere. Hello, space junkies, and welcome to Space Junk. I'm going to have to start saying that now.
Yeah, there you go.
I usually see space fans.
We just put up a new episode with Travis Burke. He is a National Geographic photographer, world-renowned photographer. You've probably seen his photos without even knowing it. So definitely check out that podcast. Fantastic podcast. Great to listen to. Fascinating stuff on there. So shameless plug on the podcast. Yeah. Everyone listen to it.
Thank you. Yeah, and we've got lots of cool stuff coming up, too. We got Space Fab coming next. These are the Space Telescope guys for everybody. And so that'll be a really great one coming up. A lot of great guests planned as well. Dustin gave me a list of who he's invited. So we got a lot coming. So it'll be exciting. Definitely. And the podcast is everywhere. It's syndicated on almost all things now. So you should be able to get it wherever you listen to podcasts.
Yeah. So Tony,
yes.
I have a question for you.
Okay, Ian.
Was the first time you looked through a telescope, was that at an outreach event or someone else's telescope?
Kind of. It was someone else's telescope. I was lucky enough to go to school in Boulder, Colorado at a time when a man took over the directorship of the school district planetarium named Jim Baravic, and he was my mentor. And he ran the planetarium with the understanding that high school students could get involved. And you could go to the planetarium after school, help him design planetarium shows. You could do whatever you wanted, whatever interested in you. And he had a lot of telescopes, and he let you take them home. So he would have star parties. And before I knew anything about a telescope, he had an old Criterion. I don't know if you remember these. Maybe probably you don't. Criterion RV6. It was a 6-inch Newtonian with a crappy ass clock drive on it. It had one of those synchronous motors that you get from a clock on it, and it drove a worm gear and turned it, and it worked, but that was it. That was the whole thing. And for me, it was the Ring Nebula, trying to find it through that thing. But that was my first experience.
That's great. I mean, I think any opportunity to get people involved with astronomy is big, and planetarium shows are awesome for that. Documentaries are awesome for that. For me, just getting interested in space, watching old Carl Sagan videos, Richard Feynman and Neil Tyson videos on YouTube. I think YouTube, at least for me, has been a great resource to just fan that flame of passion for astronomy, because I'm kind of interested. You have that little spark going, but you need something to fan that flame, right? You need something to keep that going. And I think YouTube was huge for me in that.
I love planetaria. I love being under a dome, whether it's a planetarium or an observatory, but I really love planetaria because I can design a show as if I'm writing a YouTube video. That's why I got into YouTube videos, because I had that background. And I loved being able to give star shows inside. I had a Star Lab planetarium many years ago I would take to schools, and I loved doing that. Going to schools, inflating that planetarium in the gym, and just having kids cycle through all day long. I could see 30 people at a time, and I just did that all day long, and I loved it. And it was a great way to sort of enhance whatever science curriculum was going on at the school at the time. So I'm thinking of buying another one. If I can get enough money, they cost about $10K. I'm thinking about buying another one, because now they've gotten so fancy, you don't have to crawl in through a hole like I had to do. They just inflate with a regular square house fan, and they blow up, and you walk inside and you sit down on the floor, and you have the night sky there. So I'm thinking of doing that again. I don't know.
I've never seen one of those before. I've heard about it, and I've seen advertisements in like Sky and Telescope about home planetariums. I've never actually seen one. The only planetarium shows I've ever been to was Hayden Planetarium in New York, and then Griffith Observatory. Those are the only two I've ever been to.
Well, I recommend, look up Star Lab. You'll see what I'm talking about. They're really, there's other companies too, but that was the one I had. I think they're just a great way to get mostly to schools, but also to the general public, because people get curious when you see this big bubble sitting in the middle of nowhere. Muffin. That is I love that handle. Muffin. I do outreach in New York City. I do outreach events in New York City for a lot of folks. Just being able to see anything is exciting. Though I get a large number of astrology questions, which I am ill-equipped to answer. What do you got? You get that too? I heard you groan.
You get the full spectrum. Let's say that. So when you do outreach events, so any of you who have done an outreach event, you know exactly what Home Muffin is talking about. For those of you who don't do outreach events, let me tell you, you get the full spectrum of people. You'll get, most people are generally interested and want to talk about whatever they're looking at. So if you're looking at the moon, they're interested to talk about the moon or anything space related. Then you get the people on one side who have no interest. They look and they go, oh, cool, and then move on with their day. Then you get the other side, and those are the people who are, I say, what's the best way to put it? You even a lifesaver won't save them. They are so far out to sea that you cannot bring them back. And what I mean by that is flat Earth, moon landing hoax people. I mean, just the last event I did, I ran into a flat Earth person. I thought it was a myth. I thought it was some internet joke, and
Sadly,
people are just it was defeating knowing that this human existed. And you know what? No offense to that person. They could be a very nice person, and you know what? But it's just, how do you have that mentality of?
Was he nice though?
He was I mean, I don't want to talk bad about anybody. He was nice. He was willing to talk.
Good.
But changing their mind is not something that's going to happen. Let's just say that.
That brings up a topic I'm very interested in as well, and that is this distrust of science that's out there, both from people like Flat Earth as well as conspiracy theorists, and almost anything NASA says anymore. There's always a group of people that says it's fake, or that NASA's hiding it, or it's feeding us a line of whatever. And I have a lot to talk about on that topic, but I don't know quite how. But there is a greater distrust of science than I think ever before. I think there's a lot of reason for it, and it's something that we all need to watch out for. I think it's partly because a lot of people some people who are doing science outreach are kind of belligerent about it, a little bit arrogant, and they want to dismiss what other people believe before their own scientific interests. And so I think that's part of it, and I think we can go a long way to helping this distrust by not being so belligerent about things like religion or other things that aren't related to science. Don't talk about them if they're not science, and you'll be fine.
Or be open to people having differing opinions than you. Just because someone has a different viewpoint than you doesn't make that person bad. And
exactly.
And approach it that way.
And the scientists who engage in this, the science outreach professionals engaging in this, are themselves stating opinions and statements of belief or faith. It just happens to be about about science, but they're still statements of faith, and yet they want to come across as being more authoritative than what it is. And I think they need to be careful. That's all I'm going to say about that. But this is on the topic of this one. But that's part of an issue when you see I tried to engage with flat earthers in a video when the eclipse came, and I won't ever do that again. It was just a waste of my time.
Never again.
Yeah. Hans, go ahead. Do you want to say something?
I was going to say this is something when you do, because this really is relevant to the topic. When you do outreach, you're going to get these kinds of questions. And you know what? Just be polite, be kind. Don't, just be a good, as one of my colleagues says, be a good dude.
Yeah. And my wife gave me really good advice on how to deal with this. She said, if you're trying to convince somebody of something that they are belligerent about or antagonistic toward, you begin by wherever it is they are. Start with where they are and say, okay, well, the earth is flat. What would you expect to see during a solar eclipse? And engage them that way. And go, well, okay. One of the big things I found about that whole exercise was that there were many flat earthers who really, really wanted to understand why it was that the shadow of the moon went from west to east. They couldn't understand why. It didn't make any sense. And so, and they didn't even understand how it is that the shadow of the moon could be made on the earth so much smaller. Because what they tried to do, to their credit, is they would take a ball, they would take a flashlight, and they would shine it on the wall, and no matter what they did, they could not get the shadow of the moon to be smaller than the light. And that was a good idea. The only problem was they didn't realize that the sun is much, much bigger than the moon. And that if they had used a bigger light, they would have gotten a smaller moon shadow. So there were people trying to figure it out. And they were using their little experiment as a way to prove that they were right, except that their experiment was a little flawed in that regard.
There were attempts.
Right. They at least tried. Hans
And
Milling, let me just read a quick comment from Hans.
yeah.
He is saying, I also had my telescope in my daughter's school teaching her class about the universe. It was a day of a solar eclipse, and I brought solar glasses and a solar filter, but too many clouds.
Oh
Yes.
no.
Good effort, though, Hans. That's really cool that
Yeah,
you're doing that.
that's something we all. I mean, I think that's one of the things that makes astronomy so rewarding too, is because of all these hurdles you have to go over. When you finally get that clear sky, that clear night, perfect seeing. Oh, it's just.
Ho Muffin, I always try to be polite. I actually stumbled into amateur astronomy by way of anthropology. So a lot of times I talk about the mythology behind stars. You know, that's one of my favorite things to do is to tell constellation stories. Do you ever do that?
A little bit, just of the ones that I'm familiar with. I'm not familiar with all the constellations and their backgrounds, but the ones that I am familiar, Orion or Orion and Scorpio.
Yeah.
So
a lot of the times I did it, I told the story of I would tell the story of Cassiopeia the queen, Andromeda the princess, Perseus the hero, and by the time you've told all those stories, I did this in the early 90s, maybe late 80s, and one kid comes up and he says, that's the story of Clash of the Titans movie. And it's really true. That is the story of the Clash of the Titans. That's a constellation story. So that's an old 80s movie. I think it was remade.
Oh man, yeah. I also wanted to come back to the when you do outreach. Some of the one of the coolest things about doing outreach, I think, is interacting with people, interacting with the general public who aren't too familiar with astronomy. When you get them looking through the eyepiece or looking at a screen, whatever your outreach method is, the moment they start asking questions, that's when you have them. That's when you got them hooked. They start asking questions like, oh, wow, they look at the eyepiece. Wow, the moon's so pretty. And then they start asking, it has this weird texture to it, these crater looking things. What is that? And those are actually craters. And craters could be hundreds, thousands, even millions of years old because there's no atmosphere on the moon. And I get so excited talking about this stuff, and then they love hearing this stuff, and then you get a conversation back and forth going with them. That's one of the coolest things about doing outreach is being able to have these conversations, being able to have these people ask questions without fear. A lot of people always say, oh, I know this is a dumb question, but. And I was like, there are no dumb questions. If you're asking, it means you are curious, and that's the scientist in you.
Yeah, that's true. I just want to go to a couple of comments on Facebook from Alexander again. I was at a star party at Mount Wilson Observatory where I met Blake, who you mentioned earlier. And then he's got a personal story. Mount Wilson Observatory was where I fell in love with the stars, got to see through the 60-inch, and at that point, I changed my major to astrophysics.
All right, fellow astrophysicist.
Yeah. And Joey Probolis, also on Facebook. I fell in love with astronomy when I learned I was actually looking at Jupiter in the night sky. Good. Hi, Sylvia.
I love hearing these stories. I mean, everyone in the chat, everyone in the interwebs, post your story of how you got into astronomy. I love seeing those stories. I love seeing when people talk about that stuff.
Yeah, now you and I, maybe not you personally, and I don't know, but maybe we could. I think we're going to start doing some live streaming with telescopes, aren't we?
That's right.
Okay.
We've got our remote observatory in Joshua Tree that we're going to get you set up on, and we can do live streams. We could do live science, really anything. Once you have the telescope, you have the equipment. What do we want to do with it? And maybe some of you fellas in the chat and you ladies in the chat, if you had access to this telescope, join us. What do you guys want to do?
That's right. And I tell you, one of the things I want to try and do with it, I've told this to Dustin, is I want to try and use the telescope to see if we can measure the light curves of some of these exoplanets that are out there ourselves. And I know that the science of exoplanet astronomy started with a wide field f2 telescope sitting in a parking lot in Boulder on a Meade 16-inch, I think, Ford LX200 mount. And I don't even think it was GoTo, but they measured the first light curves from one of the first stars. It was an HD number, and I forget the number now, using equipment that I bet now we could do with some of these filters and stuff that's on these telescopes. So that's what I want to try, and we can do this together, live streaming it, all of us, and talking while we do it, and working through the problem ourselves and figuring it out.
That sounds awesome.
That's what I want to do. One of the things I want to do anyway.
We should definitely do that.
So yeah. And then of course, any topics that you or things that you guys want to try out with them as well, we could certainly do. David Sims, or wait a second, are the Mormons still? No, wait, I'm not going there. Sorry, David. I'm not going to go there. Let's see. I'm curious about the new I'm curious about the new generation of Malincam scopes and stuff like the scope from Unistellar. Was thinking of grabbing one for outreach.
Yeah, Unistellar and companies that are making these electronic eyepiece telescopes. Basically, what they're doing is making telescopes that are going to be completely automated and easy to use, whether the image comes up on a tablet or your phone, or you look through the eyepiece and it's got a display in there. That's kind of these up and coming companies are making these products. And those would be really good for outreach because they can do things like live stacking. So, let's take the Ring Nebula, for example. When you look at it through an eyepiece, you could barely make out the fuzziness of it. But when you see it, you're looking at it, right? Now with one of these telescopes, it does live stacking. So it'll take a 5-second exposure with a color camera built into the telescope. And then 5 seconds later, it'll stack that previous image on top of this new one. And then 5 seconds later, it'll do it again and again and continually stack these images together. So as time goes on, the image of the Ring Nebula gets brighter and brighter and clearer, and you start to get color, and you're actually looking through an electronic eyepiece or on your tablet, and that's another way to do outreach, is with these new up and coming telescopes. So really, really exciting new technology that's coming out.
So hang on, that the telescope has, I get that it has the stacking software built on it, but you're doing this all through a mobile device?
Yeah. So depending on, So depending on which company we're talking about, because there's a couple different ones building this kind of product. It has a camera built in, and it has all the software either built into the telescope itself and displaying it in an eyepiece, and it's really just a screen in there, or through, like you said, software on a tablet. That's what it's doing. It's continually stacking these images, doing what they call live stacking or video astronomy.
Wow. One day we're going to do a hangout where we talk about that process, why stacking is important, and why and what that does, signal and noise and all of that kind of stuff, as we because it's important. These are important concepts to understand, and this is stuff that used to be so hard, folks. God, I mean, now it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to do it on my smartphone, and shut up. But it's like I come from the world of technical pan 2415 film that has been hypersensitized with hydrogen gas. That's what I use to take an astrophoto with, and talk about a hassle. That was a definite hassle. You had to hyper the film, and then you had to go out and you had to keep it frozen all the time, and then you got to use it. You had to take out a few frames, and of course you're doing all of this in one of those dark film jackets where you can't see anything because you don't want to expose the film. So yeah, I just got to say, Hans Milling posted on Discord a picture that he took of the Mercury transit in 2016 through his Meade ETX 80 AT telescope with a solar filter. Go check it out. The link to the Discord is in the description box. Click on it. Go to this picture and see it. It's really cool. Thanks for posting that, awesome. Hans. That's really great.
That's awesome.
Nell, how exactly does adaptive optics with lasers? With lasers work, and will it ever trickle down to consumers?
Ooh.
Do you want to know a poor man's adaptive optics?
Let's hear it.
High frame rates.
It
only works with bright objects like planets and the moon. But they used to use webcams, which took 30 frames a second, and webcams would feed all of those frames into a computer, and then you had a piece of software. I used Registax at the time. Now it's probably something else that looks at every image and throws away the one where the point spread function's too out of focus, right? And throws those out and only uses the crisp, clear images that it took in between the roiling atmosphere. Okay, because every once in a while, at 30 frames a second, the atmosphere is pristine for just a brief moment, and you keep all of those. You pick all those out, and what you're left with are sharp, clear, crisp images without the atmosphere in them. That's poor.
Oh yeah,
and that was the cost of a webcam.
Well, and that's still the process now for planetary, solar imaging, and even lunar. If you want the really, really high res shots of those craters, it's a good way to do it. To answer the question, at least with lasers, I think they use sodium lasers, right, to create an artificial star. It's been a little while since I looked at how they do adaptive optics in professional observatories, but on the consumer level, they have what's called active optics, AO. Companies like Starlight Express, for example, what they'll do is they have a lens, and what it'll do is about 10 times a second, it'll deform itself to correct for any atmospheric issues that are interfering with the light coming in. So it'll feed the information into some software, and then the lens will actually correct itself and move around to give you a nice sharp image. So it's constantly correcting itself, making sure that you have a nice sharp pinpoint star and sharp images coming in.
Right. And that is hard to do on a prosumer level. To be able, the lasers are shined up high in the atmosphere so that they can get a sense of the atmosphere, the wave, the shape of the incoming wavefront, and then make its changes before the wave actually gets down to the telescope. So that's not something, I don't know. Do you think it'll ever be? Probably will. It'll be. Yeah, you guys will be selling it maybe in 6 months or so.
Most technology too, like the forefront of technology is in professional observatories, because they're doing things that no one's ever done before. They're making these huge optical systems, and when you talk about observatories, especially at the professional level, you're not just talking about a giant mirror or giant lenses. It's all of the software, all of the mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, everything that is involved in building this and making these observatories possible. That's going to trickle down into the economy at some point, and a lot of it already has from, ones from the 80s and 90s and previous generations of telescopes.
Yeah, and I think one big specific area that's been helped by this has been in the realm of coatings. Optical coatings have really been experimented with and developed for scientific use for very specific reasons, like high infrared transmission or just low reflectivity, whatever it happens to be, and those have made it onto consumer telescopes. And really, and the reason that's so important is we've talked about this, I think, the last time we were together. A small diameter mirror can let in more, or I should say a lens can let through more light if it's got anti-reflective coatings on it than a larger mirror without those coatings. And so it's a really good thing to have. Unfortunately, they're quite expensive. So at least it can be sometimes.
Oh yeah.
So are you familiar? What are the most common coatings on refractors now? Magnesium fluoride? Magnesium chloride. Fluoride?
Not chloride. Fluoride, yeah. I know mirrors still tend to
use... That's not a coating. That's a type of quartz. That's a type of
I know mirrors use aluminum coatings.
Yeah.
But the specifics of the coatings, I'm not too... At least off the top of my head, I'm not too sure.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I was just curious.
Yeah, and another thing I wanted to bring up about outreach is the kinds of telescopes you can actually use to do outreach. So
what are the best?
The best is, the biggest you can get, right? We all know aperture, bigger is always better in astronomy.
Yeah.
If you're doing visual, like I said in the beginning, you could get a 60, 70 millimeter refractor and just start showing people that. Now, I think one of the ways to impress people would be a Dobsonian, because one, it looks big. So that'll catch people's attention. And then you can get really, really close up on craters of the moon, or, really crisp views of the planets. So the Dobsonians are a great way to do outreach. If you have a big event where there's going to be a lot of people looking through, I think go-to telescopes are the way to go, because they can track. You don't have to constantly be moving the mount to put the object back in the center of the field of view. So I think for big events, when there's tons of people, go-to is the way to go, like a Next Star Evolution, or a Meade Star Navigator. any go-to telescope is perfect for those outreach events.
Yeah, because you're going to lose them if you're sitting here hunting through an eyepiece. If you got people standing, waiting around for you to find something, you're going to lose them. So I agree. You definitely want to have something like that handy.
Yeah, and it gives you the opportunity to talk to people too. So next person can come up and start looking, and while you can engage with other people who have questions.
Well, yeah, you could say, the Andromeda Galaxy is right over here. So you go M31, enter, go to, off it goes. And while it's doing that, you're talking. This is a galaxy that is currently on its way to us now. It's 2.5 million light years away, and it's going to hit us in about 4 billion years. Direct collision with the Milky Way,
and that blows people's mind and sparks so many questions.
What? It's coming at us? Yeah, I'm afraid so.
Our star's going to collide and black hole. Are we going to get sucked up by the black hole?
yeah, that's true. It is a lot of fun to talk about that stuff. James Dugan,
I love it.
Tony should have a few nights to work out how it all works with live stacking and stretching. I think James has you've been with me long enough to know that I get technical difficulties when I'm first starting something. How it all works with live stacking and stretching and using the remote sight scope with all the up-to-date gear. That would be fun. I am jealous, Tony. Hey, James, join me. That's the whole point. You come, we'll do it together. I'm not going to be any closer to the telescope than you're going to be. And we're going to, well, maybe you are, unless you're if you're in I don't know, South Africa or something, you'll be a little bit further away. But we're still going to be far from the telescope doing work on it. So it doesn't matter. It's what the intertubes are for. So we'll do this together. We'll try it. We'll fail. I promise, Ian, not to break anything. Well, actually, I better not do that. I better not promise that.
Promises you can't keep.
Don't be doing that, man. Okay, well, and but I did get a comment though in the last video. You talking about bigger is better. One guy commented, I forgot his name now. He said, "No, why are you telling people to get large telescopes when all that's going to do is end up it's going to be too big and too heavy, and it's just going to sit in their closet and they're never going to use it again." Mm-hmm. Do you agree with that?
So again, when people contact OPT and want advice on telescopes, we always want to match them with the product that they're going to use, right? So that's why we ask questions. We say, you know what, are you going to be traveling a lot? This is how heavy it is. Are you aware that this is, actually 150 pounds? Are you actually going to use that? Get the person thinking. That's why we probe them with questions. Yeah. And we don't want to sell you a 20-inch Dob that's going to sit in the closet, because if you're not using it, well, what's the point? We want you to get that 8-inch Dob that you can throw in the back of your car and actually go out with and use every time you go camping, because you're using it. And that is the best part about astronomy, is when you are actually doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I can't tell you how important that is. I'm that guy. I bought big scopes, and I love the night sky. No one loves it more than me. And I had I think it was a 10-inch Dob. And there were nights I just didn't feel lugging it around. I had a 70-pound LX200 10-inch scope for many years, and I didn't want to set it up because it didn't have polar alignment, and I didn't have the GPS thing, and I had to do it myself. And there were times I just didn't feel like doing it. But I always felt like taking out my little 4-inch Astro Scan or a pair of binoculars. So I use them a lot. So I'm that guy. Now, I was talking to Dustin the other day, and he's an imager first and foremost, and so he has no problems setting up all this equipment. But then, if you've ever met Dustin, you also know that he has the energy level of just a madman. He's really got all the he's got tons of energy, so he doesn't mind setting that stuff up and getting the images. So, and we talked about that on the podcast a little bit too. So. Anyway, what's your favorite thing to do, Ian? First of all, what's your favorite scope to use? Period.
Favorite scope to use. If I'm doing outreach, my favorite scope's the one that I don't have to set up. I use the one that's already set up. In reality, though, I'm a big fan of if I want to go to. I love using Celestron, either a Nexstar or an Evolution, or if it's a Meade telescope, maybe like an 8-inch LX90 is probably one of my favorite outreach telescopes, because you get 8 inches of aperture and it's a go-to, and it's so easy to set up. So that's what I like using. If I'm imaging, tiny 70 millimeter refractor.
Yeah. Okay. Wow, that's pretty small. Okay.
Oh yeah.
And that'll work for deep sky objects too, or you?
Oh yeah. Okay. Deep sky, wide field, and then if we throw in the narrowband or triad filters, we can do some awesome wide field imaging from downtown Oceanside, downtown Carlsbad, downtown Vista.
Okay. Superluminal, yeah. Outreach is nice, but you do risk someone potentially damaging your expensive stuff. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, it's a chance you take, I guess. But
don't bring your most expensive equipment.
Yeah, right, or at least guard it. Be very protective about it.
Yeah.
Don't touch that. I will. Let me. Here's how you focus. Where there's a focus knob. Okay. Well, we're out of time. We're gonna have to stop there. Ian and I are in the process, guys, of deciding and writing up what we're going to make for how-to videos. Okay, we've already got a couple that we're going to start with, but I want to know from you guys, what kind of how-to videos would you like to see? What do you need help with? What kind of information, what kind of tasks and using your telescope would you like us to address? And then Ian and I will go through them, and maybe who knows, if there's enough requests, we can make one. Otherwise, we're going to keep going with our list. But I just wanted to ask you guys, let us know in the chat here, and when the live stream is over, let us know in the comments, also on Discord, Facebook, Twitter, all of that stuff. Let us know, and because now's the time. We're deciding now, aren't we, to what videos we're going to make. So, okay.
Perfect.
All right, guys. Well, Ian, thank you. I guess we'll stop there. I want to thank all of you guys for watching. Tomorrow is a Astro Coffee Hangout, same time, 3:00 Eastern. We will talk about exoplanets and heavy metals. They don't seem to go along, so we're going to get along well. So we're going to be talking about that tomorrow with Carol Christian. So join me then. Thank you all so much for watching. And as always, keep looking up.